You know, there was a time I couldn't look in the mirror without crying. Not tears of sadness, not really. They were tears of rage, of a profound and aching disconnect, as if the person staring back at me was a stranger who had stolen my life. For years, that stranger, that boy, that man was all I saw. This is the story of how I let him go, and how I finally met myself. Is she a girl or a dream brought to life? The bass of the music was a physical thing, a heavy rhythmic pulse that throbbed through the soles of my feet and up into my chest. It felt like a second heartbeat, one that was wild and fearless and everything I wasn't. I stood in the cramped, dimly lit staff bathroom behind the main bar of the Velvet Curtain, a place that smelled of cheap air freshener and stale beer. In the cracked mirror, a stranger was looking back at me, but for the first time, it was a stranger I desperately wanted to be. Brielle, that was her name. My name. It felt fragile on my tongue, a beautiful glass ornament I was afraid to drop. My hands trembled as I smoothed down the front of the dress one last time. It was a slip of deep amethyst satin that clung to my body in a way no clothes ever had before. It hugged the gentle, padded swell of my hips and the C-cup breast forms that felt both foreign and fundamentally right nestled against my chest. Every tiny adjustment, every nervous tug at the spaghetti straps, sent a jolt through my system, a dizzying cocktail of pure, unadulterated terror and a giddy, soaring excitement that threatened to lift me right out of my shoes. "Stop fidgeting! You're going to wrinkle the satin." Julia's voice was a warm, teasing presence beside me. She leaned against the doorframe, a genuine, crinkle-eyed smile on her face. "You look, honestly, Brielle, you look like you?" Her words were a balm. Julia was the first person I had ever told, the friend who had looked at me, a sobbing mess on her apartment floor confessing my deepest secret, and had simply asked, "Okay, so, what's her name?" She was my rock, my co-conspirator, my sister in all but blood. "It feels unreal," I whispered, my voice a little husky. I had been practicing pitching it higher, softer, but nerves had a way of bringing back the old resonance. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Is it too much?" The dress. The makeup. Julia had spent 2 hours on my makeup. A soft, smoky eye that made my brown eyes seem larger and deeper. A dusting of blush that gave me cheekbones I didn't know existed. And a shade of matte lipstick called Forbidden Berry that made my lips feel like the centerpiece of my entire existence. My hair was a wig, a cascade of soft, dark brown waves that fell just past my shoulders. The way it tickled my bare skin was a constant, thrilling reminder that this was real. "It's perfect," she said, stepping forward to adjust one of the straps on my shoulder. Her touch was gentle. "The only thing that's too much is the frantic rabbit thing your heart is doing. I can practically see it through the dress. Breathe." I took a deep, shuddering breath. The satin tightening across my ribs. The physical sensations were overwhelming. The silky fabric was cool against my skin, a constant caress. Underneath, I wore a pair of hip pads, a constricting gaff that made me feel secure, and sheer black stockings held up by a delicate garter belt. The light pinch of the garters, the smooth slide of the nylon against my freshly shaved legs, it was a secret symphony of femininity playing out just for me. And then there were the shoes, 3-inch black stilettos that forced me into a new posture, a new way of holding myself. My weight was shifted forward. My hips swayed naturally when I walked, and I felt elegantly precarious, like a fawn on new legs. Each step was a deliberate act of balance and faith. "Ready?" Julia asked, her eyes sparkling with reflected light from the club. I looked at Brielle in the mirror one last time. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a flicker of defiance in them, a spark of hope. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "As I'll ever be." Julia led the way, parting the sea of bodies like a pro. The main floor was a chaotic vortex of sound and light. Purple and pink strobes swept across a mass of dancing people, their faces illuminated in fleeting, ecstatic flashes. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, perfume, and spilled liquor. For a moment, I froze. Every person was a pair of eyes, a potential judgment, my old self. The boy who lived his life trying to be invisible screamed at me to run back to the bathroom, to tear off this costume and hide. But then my boyfriend, Sam, was there, materializing out of the crowd. He'd been saving us a small table in a quieter corner. When his eyes found me, they widened, just for a second, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He didn't look at me like he was seeing a man in a dress. He looked at me the way he always did, but with an added layer of awe. "Wow," he mouthed over the music. He took my hand, his grip warm and steady, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. His other hand went to the small of my back, guiding me through the throng. The simple, possessive gesture sent a blush creeping up my neck. It was a gesture meant for a girlfriend, a partner, a woman. Tonight. That was me. We settled at the table, Julia ordering a round of drinks. Sam leaned in close, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "You are breathtaking." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "You're not," he said with certainty. "You're the most beautiful woman in this room. Just let yourself believe it." I watched the people around us. They laughed, they danced, they drank, and they glanced at me. Their eyes would sweep over our table, linger for a moment, and then move on. There were no double takes, no sneers, no pointing fingers. I was just another woman in a nightclub, a splash of amethyst in a sea of Saturday night glamour. The anonymity was liberating. I wasn't the boy from my ID card. I wasn't a man in a dress. I was just Brielle. After one, then 2 gin and tonics. The tight knot of anxiety in my stomach began to loosen. The music started to feel less like an assault and more like an invitation. Julia was already on the dance floor, a whirlwind of joyful energy. "Dance with me," Sam asked, his hand extended. I hesitated. Walking in these heels was one thing. Dancing was a whole other level of terrifying ambition. I don't know how." "Just follow my lead," he smiled. "I'll hold you." He led me to the edge of the dance floor. Finding a small pocket of space, he pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was clumsy at first, my steps stiff and uncertain, but Sam was a steady anchor. He moved with an easy rhythm, guiding me, whispering encouragement in my ear. I rested my head against his shoulder, closing my eyes, and just focused on the feel of his body against mine, the satin of my dress a slick barrier between us, the beat of the music resonating through us both. I let go. My hips started to move, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. I was dancing, in a dress, in a club, and the world hadn't ended. When the song faded into a slower, more sensual beat, we stayed where we were. I lifted my head, my eyes meeting his. The look on his face was one of such profound love that it stole my breath. That was when another man approached. He was tall, with kind eyes and a friendly, unassuming smile. He looked to be in his late 20s. My entire body went rigid. This was it, the moment of confrontation. He looked at me, then gave a respectful nod to Sam. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice polite. "I just wanted to say, I think you're incredibly beautiful. My friends and I are heading out, but I would have kicked myself if I didn't at least tell you that." I was so stunned. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. Sam, bless him, just smiled. "Thank you." "She is, isn't she?" The man's eyes returned to me. Would you mind if I asked your name?" The question hung in the air. This was the test, the real one. I took a breath. "My name is Brielle," I said, and the name flowed out, smooth and sure. It felt right. Then a wave of honesty, of needing this moment to be completely real, washed over me, and I'm transgender. I held my breath, bracing for the shift. The polite smile to falter, the confusion, the hasty retreat. The man's smile didn't change. It might have even softened. He looked at me for a long moment, a moment in which I felt utterly, terrifyingly exposed. Then he said, "Brielle, that's a lovely name. You are very beautiful and very brave." He gave a small, genuine bow of his head. "It was a pleasure to meet you." And then he was gone, disappearing back into the crowd. I turned to Sam, my eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. He just wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight right there in the middle of the dance floor. "Did you hear that I whispered into his chest?" "I heard it," he murmured back, his lips against my hair. "He saw you. Brielle, he saw you." In the pulsing heart of the nightclub, surrounded by strangers, I felt more seen than I had in my entire life. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was no longer the loudest voice. Beneath the music, I could hear a new sound, the quiet, steady hum of my own becoming. Brielle was no longer just a dream I had in private. She was here, under the lights. And she was real. The body is changing, and so is the soul. The morning after the nightclub was a strange mix of emotional hangover and quiet euphoria. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds, my head a little fuzzy from the gin. The first thing I saw was the amethyst dress, pooled on a chair like a discarded jewel. The memories came back in a rush: the music, the dancing, the man's kind words. A slow smile spread across my face. I padded to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The makeup was smudged. The wig was slightly askew on its stand. But the eyes staring back at me were different. They held a new light, a glimmer of the confidence I had borrowed from Brielle last night. Maybe, I thought, it wasn't borrowed at all. Maybe it was just mine. That day marked a turning point. The nightclub had been a test, a dip of the toe into the vast ocean of womanhood. Now, I was ready to swim. 2 weeks later, I had my first appointment at the endocrinologist's office. The clinic was sterile and impersonal, But the doctor was kind, his questions direct but respectful. He walked me through the effects of hormone replacement therapy, the physical changes, the emotional shifts, the risks. I listened, nodding, but my mind was already made up. This wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. It was like I had been born with a critical vitamin deficiency, and my body and soul had been starving for it my whole life. I left with a prescription in my hand. It felt heavier than a simple piece of paper. It felt like a key. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed, the small white pill resting in the palm of my hand. It looked so insignificant. How could something so tiny hold the power to remake a person? Sam sat beside me, his hand resting gently on my back. He didn't say anything, just offered his silent, unwavering support. I put the pill on my tongue and washed it down with a glass of water. And that was it. No thunderclap, no flash of light. Just a small, quiet act of rebellion against the body I had been born into. I started a journal, a simple leather-bound book. To chronicle the changes, I needed to document this, to prove to myself that it was real. Week 2. My skin feels softer. Is that possible already? Or am I imagining it? I keep touching my arm, the back of my hand. The texture feels finer, less coarse. Sam says my face looks less angular, but I think he's just being sweet. The biggest thing is the smell. My scent is changing. It's fainter, sweeter, less male. That alone makes me want to cry with relief. The first real, undeniable change came about a month in. I woke up one morning with a dull, persistent ache in my chest. When I prodded the area around my nipples, a sharp, tender pain shot through me. I gasped. It wasn't a bad pain. It was a miraculous one. It was the pain of growth, of my body finally listening to the instructions my heart had been screaming for years. Breast buds. They were tiny, barely perceptible bumps, but to me, they were mountains. That night, I stood shirtless in front of the mirror, tracing their small outlines. Sam came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. "A little," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "It's the best pain I've ever felt." He smiled into the mirror, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. "You're blooming, Brielle." The changes were a slow, unfolding tide. My body hair thinned, my muscles softened, and fat began to slowly, magically redistribute, moving from my waist to my hips and thighs. My clothes started to fit differently. My old jeans became tight in the seat and loose in the waist. My shirts, which used to hang straight, now felt constricting across my growing chest. Shopping became a ritual of discovery and affirmation. The first time I went to buy a real bra was an exercise in terror. I walked into the lingerie department of a large department store, feeling like an imposter, a spy in the house of women. My heart hammered as I browsed the racks of lace and silk, my hands sweating. I had no idea what I was doing. A kind-faced, older saleswoman approached me. "Can I help you find anything?" "Dear, I nearly bolted. I'm just looking," I stammered. "Are you looking for yourself?" she asked, her tone gentle and non-judgmental. I took a breath and nodded, my cheeks burning. "Yes, I'm not sure of my size." "Well, let's fix that, shall we?" she said with a warm smile. "Come with me." She led me to a fitting room and expertly wielded a measuring tape, chatting casually about the weather as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Her professionalism was a gift. She declared me a 36B and then brought me an armful of simple, soft cup training bras. Alone in the fitting room, I slipped one on. It was made of soft, white cotton. It wasn't sexy or lacy, but as I looked in the mirror, seeing the smooth, feminine silhouette it created under my t-shirt, I broke down and cried, tears of gratitude, of relief. It was another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. I bought 3 of them. The emotional changes were just as profound and far more unpredictable. I became more prone to tears, crying at sad movies, sweet commercials, and sometimes for no reason at all. My emotions felt closer to the surface, more accessible. One evening, I was trying to open a stubborn jar of pickles and simply couldn't. Frustration welled up, and I burst into tears, sinking onto the kitchen floor. Sam found me there, bewildered. "Hey, what's wrong?" "It's just a jar of pickles." I know, I wailed, but I can't open it. My arms feel so weak now. It was a silly thing, but it represented a tangible loss of the old masculine strength I had always taken for granted. He sat on the floor with me, took the jar, and opened it with a grunt. Then he put it aside and just held me, letting me cry it out. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to be strong in that way anymore. Let me be strong for you." His patience was infinite. He celebrated every tiny victory with me the first time someone called me ma'am at the grocery store, the day I finally mastered a simple eyeliner wing. He held me through the dysphoric days, the ones where I'd look in the mirror and see only the masculine features I so despised. The shadow of a beard no amount of shaving could fully erase. "It's a process," he'd say, stroking my hair. "You're a masterpiece under construction. It takes time." As the months passed, the changes became more noticeable. My face grew rounder, my cheeks fuller. The curves of my hips became undeniable. I documented everything in my journal, drawing little sketches, taping in photos. The book became a testament to my rebirth. Month 6. I wore a bikini to the beach today, just with Sam, at a secluded little cove we found. I was terrified, but the sun on my skin, the feel of the water, the way my new swimsuit hugged my body, it felt right. I saw an older couple walking down the beach, and they just smiled at us. They didn't stare. They just saw a young couple in love. I think I'm starting to see her too. Not just in the mirror, but inside me. Brielle isn't someone I put on anymore. She's the one who's been here all along. Brielle, not just a name, but a beginning. The hormones were rebuilding my body, but there was another, equally monumental change that needed to happen. My old name felt like a heavy coat I was forced to wear on a summer day, suffocating, wrong, a constant reminder of a life that was never truly mine. It was a label, a legal fiction I had to shed to be free. The process of legally changing my name and gender marker was a bureaucratic nightmare. There were forms to fill out in triplicate, affidavits to be signed, and a required announcement to be published in a local paper. A terrifying prospect that felt like outing myself to the entire city, but with every form I signed, every box I checked, I felt a piece of the old chains falling away. The day of my court hearing arrived on a crisp autumn morning. I was a bundle of nerves. What if the judge was hostile? What if he denied my petition? The what-ifs swirled in my head, a storm of anxiety. My Aunt Sienna met me on the steps of the old, imposing courthouse. She was my mother's older sister, a formidable woman with a shock of silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She had been the first person in my family I'd told after Julia, bracing myself for confusion or rejection. Instead, she had simply looked at me over the rim of her glasses and said, "Well, it's about time you started living honestly. That boy always did look miserable." Her acceptance had been a quiet, solid foundation I'd been building on ever since. Deep breaths. "Kiddo," she said now, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze. "You've faced scarier things than some grumpy old man in a robe." Sam was on my other side, his hand holding mine so tightly our fingers were laced together. Inside. The courtroom was dark wood and high ceilings, smelling of old paper and floor wax. It was intimidating. When my case was called, my old name echoed in the vast room, making me flinch. We stood before the judge, a tired-looking man who seemed to be going through the motions. He scanned my paperwork, his expression unreadable. "So," he said, his voice flat, "you're here to change your name from Michael Corbin to Brielle Corbin." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice barely a squeak. He looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, I was wearing a simple navy blue dress, a string of pearls Aunt Sienna had given me, and low, sensible heels. I had tried to look respectable, serious. He continued to study me for a long, agonizing moment. Then, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "The court sees no reason to deny this petition. It is hereby granted. Good luck to you, Ms. Corbin." Miss Corbin? The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tears instantly sprang to my eyes. Sam's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me steady. Aunt Sienna was beaming. It was over. It was real. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright autumn sunshine, and I felt 10 pounds lighter. The world looked sharper, more vibrant. "Congratulations, Brielle," Aunt Sienna said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "Welcome to the world." The next step was the DMV. If the courthouse was intimidating, the DMV was a unique circle of hell, filled with fluorescent lighting, long lines, and palpable despair. But I didn't care. I waited for 2 hours, my court order clutched in my hand like a holy relic. When my number was finally called, I handed the clerk my paperwork. He glanced from the court order to me, then back again. I braced myself for a snide remark, a challenge. Instead, he just grunted, typed something into his computer, and said, "Look at the camera." The flash went off. A few minutes later, he slid a freshly printed rectangle of plastic across the counter, and there it was. My face, smiling a real, genuine smile. Under the name I had chosen for myself, Brielle Corbin, the gender marker next to it read F. I held it in my hand, tracing the raised letters of my name. I was crying again. But these were not the quiet, emotional tears of the past few months. These were huge, gulping sobs of pure, unadulterated joy, a lifetime of dissonance, of fighting against a name and an identity that never fit, was finally over. I was legally, officially, irrevocably me, to celebrate. My mom and Julia threw a small name day party for me that weekend. My mom had been slower to come around than Aunt Sienna. There had been tears, confusion, and a mourning period for the son she thought she had. but love had won out. Seeing me happy, truly happy, for the first time in my life had finally convinced her. She helped me pick out a dress for the party, a beautiful cream-colored wrap dress that tied at the waist, as she helped me adjust the fit. She caught my eye in the mirror. "You look so beautiful." "Honey," she said, her own eyes glistening, "you look peaceful." The party was small and intimate, just my closest circle of support mom, Aunt Sienna, Julia, and Sam. They toasted me with champagne. And for the first time, the name Brielle didn't feel new or aspirational. It just felt like my name. Julia gave me a gift, a small silver necklace with a bee pendant. "So you never forget who you are," she said, winking. Later that evening, Sam and I were standing on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "How does it feel," he asked, "to be official?" "It feels," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, "like I can finally breathe, like I've been holding my breath my entire life, and I just let it out." The next Monday, I used my new ID for the first time to open a bank account under my own name. I handed the driver's license to the bank teller, my heart doing a little flutter kick of nerves and pride. She glanced at it, smiled, and said, "All right, Ms. Corbin, just fill out these forms right here." Ms. Corbin. It was music. The most beautiful music I had ever heard. I walked out of that bank not just with a new debit card, but with a sense of legitimacy that settled deep in my bones. I was no longer a secret, no longer a person who existed only behind closed doors or in safe spaces. I was Brielle Corbin, a woman with a driver's license and a bank account, a woman who existed in the bright, ordinary, and wonderful light of day. The mirror in my bedroom no longer held a stranger. It held a friend, someone I was finally getting to know, someone I was starting to truly love. If my journey can help someone else find their way out. My transition was, in many ways, a deeply selfish act. It had to be. I spent years focused inward, on my own body, my own psyche, my own survival. But as the dust began to settle, as Brielle became less of a project and more of a simple fact of my existence, I started to look outward. I thought about the years of pain, the crushing loneliness, the terror of not knowing what was wrong with me. I thought about how a single kind word from a stranger in a nightclub could feel like a miracle. And I knew I couldn't just keep that hard-won peace for myself. I had to pay it forward. The idea started as a whisper and grew into a roar. I wanted to become a therapist, specifically, a therapist for the transgender community. I had lived through the confusion, the dysphoria, the medical appointments, the fear. I knew the terrain. I could be the person I had so desperately needed when I was a lost and terrified teenager, someone who could look a struggling kid in the eye and say, with absolute certainty, "I understand. I've been there." Going back to school was a daunting prospect. I was in my late 20s, and the thought of sitting in lecture halls with students a decade younger than me was intimidating. But the sense of purpose was stronger than my fear. I enrolled in a psychology program at the local university. Walking onto campus for the first day of class was its own kind of coming out. It was the first major institution where I would only be known as Brielle. There was no past to overcome, no name to correct. I was just another student. I wore a simple blouse, dark jeans, and a pair of cute flats. I carried a messenger bag filled with fresh notebooks and a heart full of nervous excitement. The experience was transformative. I devoured my coursework, my mind lit up by theories of identity, resilience, and trauma for the first time. I had an academic framework to understand my own life. I wasn't just a collection of painful experiences. I was a case study in human psychology, a testament to the power of self-actualization. The true test came during my third year. When I began my internship at an LGBTQ+ youth center, my supervisor assigned me to co-facilitate a support group for gender-questioning teens. My first day, I stood before a small circle of anxious-looking kids, my professional-looking blazer feeling like a costume all over again. I felt the old insecurities creeping back. Who was I to guide them? I was still figuring things out myself. Then I met Alex. Alex was 17, with a mop of unruly dark hair that perpetually fell into their eyes. They sat slumped in their chair, arms crossed, radiating an aura of defiance that I recognized instantly as a shield for deep-seated fear. They barely spoke for the first 2 sessions. During our third meeting, I decided to share a small piece of my own story. I spoke in general terms about the feeling of being a stranger in my own skin, about the fear of disappointing my family, about the first time I dared to wear a dress in public. After the group session, Alex lingered behind. "The stuff you said," Alex started, not quite meeting my eyes. "About the dress? Was that real?" "Every word," I said gently. Alex finally looked up at me, their eyes wide and vulnerable. "I have a skirt. It's hidden in a shoebox under my bed. Sometimes I take it out when no one's home. I just hold it. I'm too scared to even put it on." A tear traced a path down Alex's cheek. "I don't know if I have the courage to be whatever I am. I feel like such a coward." My heart ached with recognition. I pulled up a chair and sat down, so we were at eye level. I used to say that exact same thing to myself in the mirror. I told Alex, my voice soft. I thought courage meant not being afraid, but it doesn't. Courage is being terrified and doing it anyway. Courage isn't a state of being. It's an action. The fact that you even bought that skirt, that's courage. The fact that you're here, talking to me right now, that is an immense act of courage. We talked for almost an hour. I didn't offer solutions or easy answers. I just listened. I validated Alex's fears and reflected their own strength back at them. As I watched Alex leave that day, standing a little taller than when they had arrived, I felt a click of certainty deep inside me. This was it. This was what I was meant to do. In that role, I was no longer just Brielle, the trans woman focused on her own journey. I was Miss Corbin, the intern, a figure of gentle authority and support. When I looked in the mirror before heading to the center, I adjusted my blouse and straightened my professional-looking slacks, and I felt a new kind of confidence settle over me. It wasn't the giddy excitement of a new dress or the thrill of passing as cisgender. It was a quieter, deeper confidence that came from purpose. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. My past pain wasn't a wound to be hidden. It was a resource, a well of empathy from which I could draw to help others. Every tear I had cried, every moment of fear I had endured, had been forging me into the person these kids needed me to be. The mirror no longer just showed me a woman. It showed me a future where I could stand as a lighthouse for others lost in the same storm I had weathered. a steady light to guide them safely to shore. And that reflection was more beautiful than any I had ever imagined. For you, the woman who dared to be reborn. Life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. I had my studies, my internship, and my life with Sam. Our love had been a constant, steady flame through the hurricane of my transition, and in the calm that followed, it deepened and matured. It was a love built not on fantasies, but on the shared reality of holding each other through panic attacks, celebrating small victories, and learning to navigate our new dynamic as a man and a woman. The intimacy between us had blossomed in ways I never could have anticipated. In the early days, being touched had been fraught with anxiety, my body a landscape of dysphoria. But now, my skin felt like my own. When Sam would trace the new, softer curve of my hip, or kiss the sensitive skin of my neck, the sensation was one of pure, uncomplicated pleasure. He loved my body, not in spite of its history, but because of it. He saw the story it told, the battles it had won. One cool October evening, almost 2 years after that first night at the Velvet Curtain, Sam suggested we go for a walk in the park. It was a place we often went, a quiet sanctuary in the middle of the bustling city. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the last of the autumn leaves crunched under our feet. I wore a simple cashmere sweater and a long, flowing chiffon skirt that swirled around my ankles as I walked. I felt comfortable, at ease, completely myself. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, our hands intertwined, just enjoying the peace of the evening. He led me to a small, secluded bench overlooking the duck pond. The city lights twinkled in the distance. But here, under the canopy of ancient oak trees, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. The crescent moon hung in the inky sky like a silver sliver. He turned to me on the bench, his expression suddenly serious. He took both of my hands in his. "Brielle," he began, his voice a little unsteady. "Do you remember that first night I saw you? I mean, really saw you. At the club?" I smiled. I think I was trying to permanently etch it into my memory. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful person I'd ever seen," he continued, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "But it wasn't just the dress or your makeup. It was the look in your eyes. It was like watching a star being born, all this light and fire and terror and hope mixed together. I fell in love with you long before you were Brielle. But that night, I fell in love with her, too." My heart started to beat a little faster. Watching you over these past couple of years, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. I haven't just watched you change your body. I've watched you reclaim your soul. You fought through so much pain and fear to become the person you were always meant to be. I don't just love you for who you are right now, Brielle. I love you for the journey that brought you here. I love every single part of you, the past and the present." Tears were welling in my eyes, shimmering in the dim light of the park lamps. Then, to my complete and utter shock, he slid off the bench and knelt on one knee in the fallen leaves. My hands flew to my mouth, a soft gasp escaping my lips. He pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside, nestled on a cushion of black satin, was a simple, elegant ring with a single, sparkling diamond that seemed to capture the light of every star above us. "I don't want to just be the man who loves you," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked up at me. "I want to be your husband, I want to build a life with you, face the world with you, and love you for every day of the rest of my life. Brielle Corbin, the bravest, kindest, most incredible woman I know. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. The traffic noise faded. The rustling leaves went silent. All that existed was his hopeful, loving face and the question hanging in the cool night air. For a moment, all my old ghosts whispered to me, "You're not a real woman. You can't be a real wife." And then, a stronger voice, my voice rose up to silence them. "Yes, you are. Yes, you can." Tears were streaming down my face now. Tears of a joy so profound, it was almost painful. I nodded, unable to speak, and then finally found my voice. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, of course. Yes." A radiant smile broke across his face. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood up, and I launched myself into his arms, burying my face in his neck and sobbing with a happiness so pure it felt like it could cleanse the whole world. He held me tightly, his hand protectively on the back of my head, letting me cry. When my sobs finally subsided, I pulled back, my hands framing his face. I looked into his eyes, and I saw our future. It wasn't a fairy tale, but something far better. It was real. "I love you so much," I said, my voice hoarse. "I love you too, my Brielle," he replied, and he kissed me. It wasn't a passionate, Hollywood kiss. It was slow and deep and full of promises. It was a kiss that sealed a vow made long before this moment, a vow of acceptance and unconditional love. As he kissed me, I felt every last vestige of the boy I used to be dissolve into the night. Every lingering doubt, every shadow of fear was vanquished by the simple, beautiful truth of this moment. I was a woman, in love, and I was going to be a wife. My life wasn't just being patched up or repaired, it was being reborn, made new, under the watchful, silent light of the stars. When a girl looks in the mirror and sees herself, that is the real magic. The weeks following the proposal were a whirlwind of happy chaos. We called our families, who responded with tears and cheers. We announced it to our friends, who immediately began planning engagement parties and asking about dates. And then came the part of the process that I had, in the deepest, most secret part of my heart, dreamed about since I was a little boy who didn't know why he loved his sister's dolls more than his own toy trucks shopping for a wedding dress. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. The bridal salon felt like the ultimate test of womanhood, a sacred space I wasn't sure I had the right to enter. What if they could tell? What if the dresses didn't fit my shoulders? What if I just looked like a man in a silly white costume? My mom, Aunt Sienna, and Julia formed my bridal entourage, my personal team of cheerleaders and protectors. We made an appointment at a beautiful little boutique downtown with large picture windows and an air of quiet elegance. Walking in, I was immediately overwhelmed. The store was a sea of white, ivory, and champagne. Gowns hung like magnificent sculptures, adorned with lace, beads, and shimmering silk. The air smelled faintly of lavender and new beginnings. A chic, friendly consultant named Chloe greeted us. "And who is our beautiful bride?" she asked with a warm smile. "This is her. This is Brielle," Julia announced, giving me a little push forward. I blushed, but Chloe's smile never faltered. She looked me up and down with a professional eye. "Well, Brielle, it's a pleasure. Do you have any ideas about what you're looking for?" I have no idea. I confessed. Something simple. I think elegant. "I love a blank canvas," Chloe said with a wink. "Let's go have some fun." She led me to a plush, private viewing area with a large three-way mirror and comfortable couches for my family. Then she started pulling dresses, an A-line with delicate lace sleeves, a sleek, modern sheath made of crepe, a romantic ball gown with a cloud of tulle for a skirt. The first dress I tried on was a disaster. It was a strapless mermaid style, and it clung in all the wrong places, emphasizing the width of my shoulders and making my hips look narrow. I looked in the mirror and saw the old me, the awkward boy playing dress-up. My heart sank. The old dysphoria, that familiar, sickly feeling, washed over me. I stepped out to show my family, my face a mask of disappointment. "Nope," Aunt Sienna said immediately, before anyone else could speak. "That's not your dress. It's wearing you. Next." Her bluntness was a relief. Chloe was already nodding in agreement. "She's right. The silhouette is wrong for your frame." "Not a problem. We'll find the right one." The second dress was better, a simple V-neck that was more flattering, but it didn't feel special. The third was too ornate. Covered in so much beading, I felt like a human chandelier. I was starting to lose hope. "Okay, I have a wild card," Chloe said, her eyes twinkling. "It's a new arrival. Just trust me." She returned with a dress made of heavy, lustrous silk. It had a classic, almost timeless design, a graceful bateau neckline that swept across the collarbone, long, fitted sleeves, and a bodice that flowed into a simple, unadorned A-line skirt that ended in a modest train. There was no lace, no beading, no fuss. Its beauty was in its structure and the luxuriousness of the fabric. I stepped into it, and as Chloe zipped it up, something felt different. The heavy silk settled around me, its weight comforting. The neckline showcased my shoulders in a way that made them look elegant, not broad. The cut skimmed over my waist and flowed gracefully over my hips, creating a perfect feminine silhouette. I walked to the pedestal in front of the three-way mirror and looked. And then I saw her, a bride. Not a trans woman in a wedding dress. Not a man in a costume. Just a bride. Serene and beautiful and absolutely real. My breath hitched in my throat. My hands, trembling slightly, came up to smooth the silk over my stomach. I felt the weight of the train behind me, a gentle anchor to this incredible reality. It felt like it had been made for me. Tears welled in my eyes. I turned to see my family. My mom was openly weeping into a handkerchief. Julia had a hand over her heart, her eyes shining. Aunt Sienna, ever stoic, simply had a deep, satisfied smile on her face. "Oh, honey," my mom whispered, "that's the one." "I think so," I said, my voice thick. I couldn't stop looking at my reflection. It was a dream I never, ever thought would be mine to live. A dream I had buried so deep I'd forgotten it was even there. And here it was, reflected back at me in triplicate. We bought the dress. The planning continued, filled with decisions about flowers and food and music. One afternoon, Julia and I were addressing invitations when I paused. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The wedding party," I said. "The officiant." I know who I want." That evening, I invited Aunt Sienna out for coffee. "I have something to ask you," I said, my nerves fluttering. "And it's okay if you say no, but you were the first person in our family who saw me, the real me. You never blinked. You just opened your arms. It would mean the world to Sam and me if you would do us the honor of officiating our wedding." Aunt Sienna stared at me, her usual composure cracking. Her eyes welled up, and she had to take off her glasses to dab at them with a napkin. "Brielle," she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaky, "there is no honor I would rather have. The night before the wedding, I was alone in my apartment. Sam was staying with his best man, abiding by the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. The wedding dress hung from the top of my bedroom door, encased in a protective white bag, a silent, beautiful ghost. I stood before my full-length mirror in a simple silk robe. The woman staring back at me was someone I finally knew. Her face was soft, her eyes were clear. There were faint lines of laughter around them that hadn't been there a few years ago. Her body was hers, from her long hair that now fell past her shoulders to the gentle curves of her hips. I no longer saw a project in progress. I didn't see a collection of surgical alterations or the results of a hormone regimen. I saw a whole person. I saw a woman on the eve of her wedding day. The journey had been long and impossibly hard, a climb up a sheer cliff face in the dark. But standing here now, I was at the summit, and the view was breathtaking. I wasn't a transformation anymore. I was simply me. And tomorrow, I would be a wife. The thought didn't bring fear or doubt, only a profound, peaceful sense of rightness, like a river finally reaching the sea. Two souls, one promise, a new beginning. The morning of my wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect, brilliant blue sky that felt like a gift from the universe. I had barely slept, my mind a buzzing hive of excitement and happy anticipation. I woke up not to an alarm, but to the gentle morning light filtering through my window, and the first thought that formed in my head was simple and pure today. I get to marry Sam. My mom and Julia arrived early, armed with coffee and pastries, their faces alight with a shared, infectious joy. Our apartment was quickly transformed into a flurry of bridal activity. Hair was curled, makeup was meticulously applied, and champagne was poured into flutes, the bubbles fizzing like our own effervescent spirits. I sat in a chair by the window as the makeup artist worked her magic, turning my face into a more polished, radiant version of itself. I felt strangely calm, a quiet stillness at the center of the joyful storm around me. Every so often, I would catch my reflection in the mirror, and a small, secret smile would touch my lips. The bride in the mirror was no longer a stranger. She was me. Finally. It was time. My mom and Julia helped me step into the silk gown. The fabric felt cool and heavy against my skin, a familiar comfort after my fitting. As my mom zipped up the back, her hands gentle and sure, she leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I am so proud of the woman you are, Brielle." Her words were the only blessing I ever truly needed. I stood before the mirror one last time. The woman staring back was luminous. The simple gown, the soft curls in my hair, the delicate string of pearls at my neck, it all came together to create an image of timeless elegance. But the most beautiful part was the light in my eyes. It was a light that came from a place of deep, hard-won peace. The ceremony was held in a beautiful botanical garden, inside a glass conservatory filled with lush greenery and blooming flowers. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, dappling the aisle with patterns of light and shadow. The air was warm and smelled of damp earth and sweet blossoms. I stood at the entrance, my arm linked through my mom's. The string quartet began to play the gentle, familiar notes of Pachelbel's Canon in D. This was it. My mom gave my hand a final squeeze, ready. I took a deep breath and nodded. Ready. We started down the aisle. I saw the faces of our friends and family, all of them smiling, some of them crying. I saw Julia, my maid of honor, beaming at me from her place at the altar, and then I saw Sam. He stood waiting for me, looking impossibly handsome in his dark gray suit. When his eyes met mine, the rest of the world faded away. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated love and awe. His eyes were shining, and as I got closer, I could see that he was trying and failing to hold back tears. In that moment, I felt like the most cherished person on earth. My mom placed my hand in Sam's, and he held it as if it were the most precious thing he had ever touched. We turned to face Aunt Sienna, who stood before us, a book in her hands and a look of profound love on her face. "Dearly beloved," she began, her voice clear and strong. "We are gathered here today in this beautiful place to witness and celebrate the joining of two lives and two souls. A wedding is a public declaration of a private love, a commitment to walk a shared path, to face life's joys and its challenges, together." She spoke beautifully about love, partnership, and commitment. Then, it was time for our vows. Sam went first. He took my other hand, so he was holding both of them, and looked directly into my eyes. "Brielle," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "From the moment I met you, I knew my life would never be the same. You taught me what real strength is, what real courage looks like. You are the kindest, most compassionate, and most beautiful soul I have ever known. You fought the world to become yourself, and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you always feel safe and cherished and loved for exactly who you are. I promise to be your partner, your champion, and your home. I love you, completely and forever." Tears were now streaming freely down my cheeks, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. I took a shaky breath and began my own vows, my voice trembling but full of conviction. "Sam," I started, squeezing his hands, "you saw me when I couldn't even see myself. You loved a person who was hidden and lost, and you stood by me, holding my hand, as I found my way out of the darkness and into the light. You never tried to fix me. You just loved me until I could fix myself. You are my rock, my safe harbor, and my greatest adventure. To stand here today, as your bride, is a miracle I never thought I would receive. I promise to love you with all that I am, to support your dreams, to be your partner in every sense of the word, and to build a life with you filled with laughter and kindness. You are my home, Sam, and I am, finally, home in myself, with you." Aunt Sienna prompted us for the rings. We exchanged them, our fingers trembling, the simple gold bands a symbol of our unending promise. Then, by the power vested in me by love, by family, and by the state, Aunt Sienna declared, her voice ringing with joy, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Sam didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around my waist, lifted me slightly off the ground, and gave me a kiss that was full of all the love and joy and relief in the world. Our guests erupted in cheers and applause, the sound echoing through the conservatory like a wave of pure happiness. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, husband and wife, the sunlight hit my face. I looked at Sam, my husband, and my heart felt so full it might actually burst. Everything, every single moment of pain and struggle, had been worth it. It had all led me here, to this man, to this moment, to this life, my life, reborn in the light. Happiness isn't becoming someone else. It's finally being allowed to be yourself. A few months after the wedding, life had settled into a beautiful, peaceful domesticity. The photos from our wedding sat on our mantelpiece, a constant, joyful reminder of that perfect day. My husband and oh, how I loved the sound of that word, and I had built a home together, a space filled with warmth, laughter, and an easy, comfortable love. I was finishing up my final year of school, my internship at the youth center having solidified my passion. My work with Alex, and with other teens like them, had become the anchor of my week, a source of profound meaning and purpose. I still saw my own therapist, Dr. Miller, on a bi-weekly basis. It was no longer about crisis management, but about maintenance, a way to check in with myself and process the incredible, seismic shifts my life had undergone. During one of our sessions, she leaned back in her chair and asked me a simple question. "So, Brielle, after all this, the transition, the wedding, your new career path, what have you learned? What's the biggest takeaway?" I thought about it for a long moment, looking out her office window at the city below. I thought about the terrified boy hiding in his room, the nervous young woman stepping into a nightclub, the determined student, the blushing bride. They were all me, different stages of the same soul unfolding. I used to think that happiness meant becoming someone else. I began, my voice quiet but sure. I spent so many years hating the person in the mirror, believing that if I could just transform into this other person, this idealized woman named Brielle, then all my problems would disappear. I thought the goal was to erase the boy completely, to become a perfect, cis-passing woman that no one would ever question. I paused, gathering my thoughts. And the physical changes were important. I continued. The hormones, the name change. They were essential. They were like a key unlocking a door I had been trapped behind. But they weren't the destination. They were the beginning of the journey, not the end. I turned my gaze back to Dr. Miller, my eyes clear. The real happiness, the real peace, didn't come from becoming someone new. It came from finally integrating all the parts of myself. It came from accepting my past, my history as that sad, lost boy, not as a source of shame, but as the foundation of the woman I am today. My strength, my empathy, my passion for helping others, it all grew from that soil. I'm not Brielle in spite of having been Michael. I'm Brielle because of it. A genuine smile touched my lips. I've learned that happiness isn't about a perfect reflection in the mirror. It's about the moment you look in the mirror and you're not looking for flaws or for proof. You're just looking at yourself. And you feel a sense of peace. You feel at home. I'm not trying to be someone else anymore. I concluded, I'm just me. And being me is more than enough. It's everything. Dr. Miller smiled, a warm, knowing expression on her face. That's a beautiful place to be. Brielle. Later that day, as I walked home from my session, the late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow on the city streets. I caught my reflection in a shop window. A woman looked back at me. She was wearing a simple dress, carrying a messenger bag filled with books. She looked happy. She looked purposeful. She looked at peace. For a moment, I saw them all. A faint, shimmering after-image in the glass, the crying boy, the determined woman, the hopeful bride. They were all there, inside me, woven into the fabric of my being, and I loved every single one of them. I smiled at the woman in the reflection, a smile of greeting, of recognition, of profound and unending gratitude. Then I turned and continued walking, my steps light and sure, ready for whatever came next, finally and completely at home in my own skin.